In most stories, Harvey Dent becomes Two-Face after fate tears his world apart. In Beware the Batman, he didn't need fate's help though, he did it to himself. This Dent is less of a victim, he's a man so desperate for power that he turns justice into a weapon and democracy into a game he can rig. Gotham's system crumbled because men like Harvey Dent stopped pretending to play fair and only Batman and Katana stood against him. But Dent's obsession with control didn't start in Beware the Batman. If anything, it's a recurring theme of the character dating back to his very first appearance. The original Two-Face debuted in Detective Comics number 66, published in 1942. He was Gotham's dashing district attorney Harvey Kent, later renamed Harvey Dent, who had everything you could want in life. Power, respect, good looks, and the love of a beautiful woman. But everything came crashing down when a hostile witness hurled acid in his face right there in the courtroom. Dent was disfigured with one side of his face scarred and hideous, essentially splitting him down the middle. His fiancée couldn't bear to look at him and she ended their relationship. Heartbroken and scarred, Dent embraced chance, using a two-headed coin to decide between good and evil. When the scarred side landed up first, Two-Face was born. Dent used his experience as district attorney to plan perfect heists and launch a campaign of terror. And yet he was a polarizing figure in Gotham. Yes, he was a thief and a brute, but sometimes he could be kind, helpful, and donated his take to charity. And that was his character's hook. You never knew what you were going to get from him. In later years, Dent's face was repaired through plastic surgery, and there were a handful of Two-Face imposters who tried to frame Dent for their crimes. But overall, he had a happy ending. For a while, at least. Harvey Dent became Two-Face again when he stumbled upon thieves robbing a store. He tried to stop them, but ended up getting caught in an explosion that permanently undid the work of his plastic surgeon. He was stuck as Two-Face forever. Following Crisis on Infinite Earths in 1985, when most of DC's continuity was reset, Frank Miller introduced Dent as an ally of Batman's during his early days in the seminal Batman Year One. The present-day stories of the time cast Two-Face as the sworn enemy of the second Robin, Jason Todd, after he murdered Todd's father. Given his gruesome appearance, Two-Face didn't appear on screen until 1992's Batman the Animated Series. That version was a major departure from what came before. There, Harvey Dent was Bruce Wayne's best friend, and quite fittingly he appeared in 2 episodes on Leatherwings and Pretty Poison before he became Two-Face. What really set their take on Harvey Dent apart was how he had struggled with his mental health since childhood, after he defended himself from a bully. Young Harvey became racked with guilt when he learned that the bully had been hospitalized. Granted, it was from appendicitis, but Dent blamed his violent outburst and swore to never show his anger again. Over time, his anger manifested as an alternate personality, Big Bad Harv. Harvey had usually been able to control him, but the stress of campaigning for re-election and taking on gangster Rupert Thorne empowered Big Bad Harv, who began emerging more frequently and destructively. When Thorne learned of Dent's condition, he blackmailed him, luring him to one of his factories on election night to tell him how things were going to be. Dent would be in his pocket, or he'd leak his illness to the press. At this point, Harvey Dent gave up and allowed Big Bad Harv to run rampant. In the chaos, Dent was caught in an explosion which disfigured half of his body, and Two-Face was born. He didn't flip his coin to decide who would be in charge. Instead, Two-Face became a separate identity following the law of averages. He still intended to continue Dent's mission, but in his own way. Two-Face knew that if you took down one gangster, another would rise up to take his place. So why not take that place himself? At the same time, he fed information to a flunky of his, Gil Mason, who was able to rise through the ranks of the GCPD thanks to the high-profile arrests he was making off of Two-Face's intel. Two-Face then framed Jim Gordon for corruption and positioned Mason to take his place as commissioner. That way, Two-Face would control both the mob and the police, which is thematically fitting. And he would have got away with it too if it weren't for that pesky Batgirl. By the time of the new Batman adventures, Two-Face had abandoned Dent's mission, likely because of the times that Dent had tried to banish Two-Face from his mind and get his face repaired, and instead he turned to murder, thievery, and ransom. In response, Harvey Dent created a new personality to combat Two-Face, the Judge, who sought to kill him. So, yeah, this version of Two-Face was far more brutal and grounded in psychology. That's not to say that he's realistic, but he follows a certain logic that is believable in the world of Batman the Animated Series, and this is probably the definitive take on Two-Face. It certainly impacted the mainline comics as well as other on-screen adaptations the most, but that doesn't mean that other versions are without their merits. Brave and the Bold's version, for instance, is a love letter to the classic Golden Age version of the character. But I think one version that doesn't really get talked about at all is the version of Two-Face that appeared in Beware the Batman, and once again, he was very different. Harvey Dent was the second secondary antagonist in Beware the Batman, appearing in the second half of the series. I'm noticing a pattern here. Where the first half had centered on Lady Shiva and her master Ra's al Ghul, the later episodes were about Harvey Dent and how he was inadvertently supporting Deathstroke. There, Harvey Dent was pretty much nothing like what had come before. He was an ambitious, morally corrupt politician. His ultimate aim was to become mayor of Gotham, and he was willing to compromise himself to achieve his goal. He was selfish, arrogant, and an opportunist. He was essentially the opposite of Jim Gordon. While Gordon had been suspicious of Batman to begin with, Batman's acts of heroism earned Gordon's loyalty. Dent, meanwhile, refused to acknowledge any of Batman's good deeds and always framed him as the villain to further his own agenda. I genuinely doubt if he cared all that much about costumed crime, but he felt it was enough of a hot-button issue that if he could at least be seen to be doing something about it, he'd be guaranteed the big job at City Hall. The fact that Batman consistently outsmarted him and evaded capture just made Dent double down. When Dent was kidnapped by Anarchy and Batman rescued him, Dent lied to the world saying that Batman was to blame. In his mind, I think he explained away the lie by thinking of it as being a fitting punishment for Batman. When the regular police force proved incapable of capturing Batman, or is that unwilling, Dent formed the Special Crimes Unit, who were tasked specifically with combating costumed crime. This unit had a vast budget and reported directly to Dent. Despite all of their resources, they too were incapable of capturing Batman. Dent conducted some extreme mental gymnastics to convince himself that Batman was the worst criminal of all, to the point that he teamed up with Anarchy to try to capture Batman and eventually brought Deathstroke to Gotham. What Dent didn't know is that Deathstroke had been there for much longer, orchestrating things from behind the scenes. He posed as Dent's number 2 guy, Dane Lislow, and wormed his way into Dent's confidence. Deathstroke pretended to be a vigilante on the side of the law, to the point that Dent endorsed him, only for Deathstroke to kidnap Dent so that he could get some FaceTime with Batman. Deathstroke wasn't all that interested in costumed crime though. Instead, he sought out his former mentor Alfred Pennyworth, but that's something I covered in a separate video which I have linked to in the info button in the top right corner. Add that to your watch later list if you would like to learn more. Later, when Deathstroke impersonated Batman to shoot Bruce Wayne at one of Dent's campaign rallies, Dent made the attack all about himself. He told the press how he came close to death and that the apparent murder of Bruce Wayne wounded him because they were such close friends. In reality, Batman could barely stand Dent, but he agreed to fund his campaign in order to keep a closer eye on him and become part of his inner circle. When Batman confronted Deathstroke at the SCU's weapons storage facility, he screamed for Dent's help, claiming that Batman was gonna kill him. That was Dent's most courageous, heroic, and stupid moment. He charged into the room, which was full of explosives, and paid the price. What he didn't realise is that Deathstroke had thrown a grenade which exploded and caused a chain reaction in the armory. Dent was caught in the blast and was rushed to hospital. This ended his aspirations to become mayor, but it also awoke something else in him. With Anarchy's help, Dent pressured his opponents to step aside and let his deputy take over, a weak man who towed Dent's line. He may not have won an election, but he controlled the city, and his first act was to declare martial law. Next, he granted the SCU the power to do whatever it took to bring in Batman, with predictably explosive results. I think this says a lot about the fragility of democracy and how the system only works so long as we all agree to play fair. The minute a ruthless bully that everyone is afraid of asserts their will, it can come tumbling down like a house of cards. This happened because no one was willing to stand up against Dent except for Jim Gordon, who was then pushed aside. And that's the frightening part. Dent didn't need to tear the system down to achieve this. He just used it. He bent laws, twisted procedure, and weaponized the police. The system protected him because it was designed to protect the powerful, not the innocent, and that's a very worrying thing to consider. It's a theme that also echoes in Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns, where Dent's face is surgically repaired, yet he still sees himself as disfigured, and it's no coincidence that Beware the Batman borrowed his design from that comic. That story argued that his scars were never really on the surface, that they were embedded in his psyche and by extension in Gotham's. Beware the Batman takes that same idea and twists it into the political realm. Here, the disfigurement is systemic. Dent doesn't just reflect Gotham's corruption, he is the mechanism that sustains it. He hides his damaged face behind bandages, not out of vanity, but as a strategy to hide the truth. They make him appear palatable, respectable, and the image of a man still in control. Gotham's politicians wear their own kind of bandages, layers of civility wrapped around decay. Dent just made the metaphor literal. There are hints of his decline. He sometimes refers to himself as we and us, which piques Anarchy's interest, but mostly he seems pretty similar, calm and ambitious, just more intense. And that's part of what makes him frightening. After his scheme fizzled out thanks to Batman's competence and Deathstroke making his move, he turned on Anarchy, trying to kill him. When he fails and must be saved by Jim Gordon, Dent declares that he's no longer interested in running Gotham and walks away, removing his bandages as he goes, symbolizing his descent into madness. It's fitting that Two-Face might have been a significant villain in the second season of the show, but sadly Beware the Batman was not renewed. Still, at least we have these character designs to show us what might have been. Beware the Batman reimagined Harvey Dent as a symptom of a rotten system, not a fallen hero. He wasn't really a tragic figure who descended into madness. He was corrupt, ambitious, and ultimately exposed how brittle democracy can be. He reminds us that democracy only works when everyone agrees to play fair, and it takes just one man who won't to bring the whole thing down. Gotham needs its rules, symbols, and belief in fairness, but Dent shows us what happens when those rules are bent by fear, when justice becomes about control, and when a man who can't control himself gains power over everyone else. In the end, Harvey Dent failed to destroy Gotham's democracy, but he succeeded in showing how easy it is for the rest of us to look away while it collapses. Okay, that's it for this week's essay. If you liked the video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, tell all your friends about me. You know how YouTube works. If you really enjoyed the video and have the means, please consider making use of the thanks button to send a buck or two my way, because every little helps. I offer channel memberships for $1.99 a month. This will get you early access to my weekly video essay, priority responses to your comments, members-only videos, custom emojis, and an icon on your profile indicating that you're one of my people. And special thanks to my channel members. Everyone who was a member at the time of this video's creation is listed on the screen right now. If you want to see your name amongst all these wonderful people, join the channel now. Next time. When I return on Friday, I'll cover an often overlooked episode of Batman the Animated Series where Batman questions whether his fight against crime really matters after Commissioner Gordon is shot in the line of duty. It's time to talk about I Am the Night. And next Monday, I'll go back to the results of my most recent Batman Beyond villain poll to talk about a group that kidnaps gifted children and turns them into weapons. Yes, it's time to talk about the Brain Trust. Hope to see you then.